Animaniacs, and it is beyond past time for my 2014 worst to best list. Years from now, historians will look back on this year and call it 2014, the year Pixar took a break and Dreamworks still couldn't win. Also, some other stuff happened. And the film we will immediately forget after I stop talking about it is...
Oh, so this is the famous girl who vanquishes wicked witches. I thought you'd be taller.
Hey, remember all those straight-to-video Disney fanfic sequels that nobody liked? You know what would be a great idea? Giving that exact same treatment to one of the most beloved family classics of all time! And boy, is it! It has a plot that's just as boring. It has songs that are just as meaningless and forgettable. It has writing that is just as child-pandering and groan-inducing. It has performances that are... arguably passable, but you cast Bernadette Peters in a musical and didn't have her sing? And in a freaky coincidence, the India-based animation company responsible for that frequently teams up with the studio that used to give us those films, and currently makes all the Tinkerbell movies. Well, that also explains why it looks significantly not up to par. Unspectacular, but not terrible, as some of the designs and ideas seemed opt for Oz, if safe. But the difference in quality from what we've come to expect from our theater animation is not subtle. Which leads us to the burning question, how did this get released to theaters? In wide release? In Blockbuster Month? Oh, and it didn't do well? Well, you don't say. Oh, and did I mention that the Tin Man, Scarecrow, and Lion are barely in this movie? Now, acknowledgement. This film was technically based off one of the original Oz books that I haven't read, so I honestly don't know how faithful it is, but I do know that this incredibly prominent character in the movie wasn't in the book at all, so... you know, that doesn't necessarily give me a vote of confidence. And even if the adaptation was faithful, it still wouldn't make this movie any less agonizing to sit through.
You know, this is a chance to prove Raccoon is wrong about you.
I don't care what Raccoon thinks. I'm independent, and that means looking out for #1.
I admit I wasn't sure which of these films to put as my absolute worst, because while Oz definitely lacks a little more in quality, the characters in The Nut Job are just so obnoxious and mean-spirited. When your main character starts out as this selfish, hateful spite of existence, think about what the film has to do to the antagonist to make you eventually root for him. And then everyone else is either similarly gimmicky or forgettable. But in the end, it does have more positives than Oz, even if they are minor. Like the female guard dog, that obvious mutation of Remy and Pinky as a mute but earnest tag-along is the closest thing to likable, some decent physical humor, and the character animation is significantly better, though definitely lacking some significant theater quality polish. And, okay, the gangster analog human side plot is... an idea. This is another foreign collaboration, this time with South Korea. I guess that's why there's an animated Psy in the closing credit for no reason. Yeah, that's not gonna date this movie at all. And nothing stands out about the story, except that it bears more than a little resemblance to Over the Hedge, in the bad rip-off-y kind of way. All told through some truly unlikable characters, and what do you get? Well, a sequel, obviously! Though at least it's getting a fitting release date.
Raced all the way around the world!
I did do that. The world wasn't on fire, though. Was it?
Was the whole world on fire? No?
Nope! I'm done. I am finished standing up for you, Disney Sentient Vehicle series. I am the only person I know that doesn't hate Cars 2. But this film is where, even for Disneytoon, I say enough. This is your Shrek 3. Which is too bad, because I actually had some hopes for this one. I mean, not high hopes, it's still planes. But if there's two things kids are fascinated with aside from animals, it's planes and firefighters. This could have been something not just fun, but informative. And there's bits and pieces of that. But then the story is so... Okay, so Dusty basically gets handicapped, meaning he'll explode if he goes above a certain speed, so naturally he decides now's the perfect time to go be a firefighter. Oh, and better yet, decides not to tell any of his team that he can't go top speed when dealing with fire. I'm sorry, your pride-induced self-denial while people are dying is not worthy of my sympathy. Pack on a greedy resort owner subplot ripped right from Jaws, yet another mentor character with a tragic past, and replacing the prior comic relief with a fangirl. Okay, that one breaks even, but it's still pretty terrible. And neither the okay animation and the nice flying scenes, the likable Curtis Armstrong character, or even the mildly intense fire scenes can fully compensate for that. However, it is still evident that these are better animated, better performed, and substantially better scripted than the old Disney sequels. So I'd still prefer Disneytoon be doing this as long as it's Disneytoon and not Pixar wasting its time with, oh, come on!
You want to watch the game while you're waiting to go in?
I don't think there's time.
World's biggest excuse. If it's important enough, you find the time.
God forbid I mock a movie that's about giving inspiration to children with cancer, except that I'm going to. A young baseball fan is diagnosed with cancer and undergoes a hallucinogenic magical tour of baseball icons of history, giving him very generic pep talks about enduring and not giving up. And then the kid felt incredibly gypped because it explicitly states in the Babe Ruth story that Babe Ruth can in fact cure cancer.
If you could send him an autographed ball, it might be the incentive the youngster needs to live.
And he cured a crippled child by simply saying, "Hiya, kid."
You thought I was kidding! This is pure, unrefined schmaltz. This is the kind of oversaturated saccharin that makes people lose feet.
You gotta believe you can do it.
Yep, that is basically the entire movie. And hey, who is this mysterious supernatural baseball tour guide who totally knows how hard it is to be sick? I don't know, it could literally be anybody. Also, flying cars, apparently the exception to stranger danger. And before you say it was a dream, the end of the movie apparently disagrees with you. Also, I'm not totally convinced this movie wasn't made exclusively to advertise Yankee pins.
They're magical.
However, credit where credit is due. Traditional character animation is so nice to see again, even if it isn't completely seamless with the CGI backgrounds, but I appreciate the effort. And they did get a lot of real baseball stars to voice in it. And aw, you kicked out the scene with the guys who lied about being on steroids. Aw, that was nice. And I acknowledge, whatever film gets someone, especially a child, through a terrible experience, who cares what anyone else thinks of that film? But that's also kind of the point. The film ultimately only has one audience, children with cancer who like baseball. If you are not a child with cancer who likes baseball, I can't really imagine what this movie would do for you. Oh, okay, I can see some non-dying baseball fans getting a cheesy, nostalgic kick out of seeing all these famous icons together and remembering a time where America actually seemed to give a crap about baseball. As long as you don't mind that they're all reciting lines from fortune cookies. And as this movie wasn't a wide release and remains a special interest independent, there's ultimately nothing awful about it, but submitting itself for the Academy nominations? Really? That is too bold.
Siding with humans? What do you even know about humans? Oh, I know everything. They lure you in. They trap you. They destroy your mind. Polly want a cracker? Polly want a cracker? No! Enough crackers!
Ah, right. Every year there's a movie that I completely forget I saw until I make the list, and so far every year it's been the Blue Sky movie. But I will give this to Rio too, the animation all around is fantastic. From the animal and the human designs, okay, not all of them, the colors, the expressions, and especially those fun and active dance numbers. The film's music is also excellent, though it is disappointing how the final number, the one that the entire film has been building up to, is easily the weakest one. The problem, aside from absolutely none of the characters being memorable in any way for all of its celebrity voice mugging, is that the movie has way too many subplots, nearly all of which are overplayed, predictable tropes. The city boy in the wild subplot, the hard-to-please the father cliché, the somehow romantic rival even though they have kids, Blue and Jewel having an argument that basically comes down to do what the wife says or you'll be blamed for being the insensitive one despite the fact that she made this decision without consulting you first. Finding wild animal international entertainment acts for Carnival, the rivalry of the Blue Macaws and the Scarlet Macaws, the evil logging guys, Linda and Tulio, and the villain from the last movie. So big shock, with so many subplots, not a single one gets enough time or attention to form properly, resulting in them all crashing together at the end for a glorious anticlimax. And yes, there are a lot of references and hip lingo, but there's also some decent physical comedy because, as said, the animation is awesome. And there are isolated entertaining moments, like the kids, the animal carnival acts, the vaudeville anteater, and naturally those dance numbers. So I can see some people liking this as a colorful, mindless time killer. It just wouldn't be my first choice.
So, how does it look?
Oh my god, I wish you could see me animated. It's pretty sick. Oh my god, I don't know, I look like a combination between Cinderella on heroin and an Egyptian queen on a bad hair day.
I always try to include some international animations on my list, however, through the nature of the multitude of regional release dates, barely any get widely released in the year they've actually been made, which is why all the ones I'm covering are technically 2013. I also can't cover every foreign release because that would mean covering the slew of identical anime tie-ins year after year, which I'm not going to do anymore, and a floodgate of comparatively mediocre Dreamworks clones. All respect given to overseas animation, but I also know everyone primarily wants to hear about the films they've actually heard about. But I like to mention a couple that at least stand out or have something worth talking about. And boy, this one sure is unique. The Congress is a French-Israeli collaboration directed by Ari Fuldman, who did the acclaimed Waltz with Bashir, that has a live-action first act and a second and third act that uses animation to convey a future where most people are permanently on drugs. That is brilliant. However, the big problem is that the second act seems to be almost a completely different story from the first part. Princess Buttercup, playing herself, is offered a contract to scan herself and sell her digital image to a studio that no longer uses real actors because digital copies are easier to control than real people. So the focus of this act seems to be on the implications and ethics of this technology, as well as the relationship between studios and their actors, with a pretty solid metaphor for selling your soul. But then the animated section suddenly becomes an hour-long demonization for the entitlement of consumers and their addiction to escapism. But honestly, the first part is more sympathetic and engaging, if only because it was comprehensible. Because very much like the creative and fluid animation, the narrative is also on drugs. I mean, the fourth time you have the, oh, it was all a dream, oh wait, maybe it wasn't moment, you start to lose the urgency of the situation. Now, I'm not saying that it's a bad narrative, because there's definitely a lot of interesting ideas being put forward. I know that the hiccuping narrative is part of this dreamscape experience, as well as central to this section's entire thesis of what is real anymore, we're too lost in our own fantasies to know what truly matters. It's just that it may not be executed in the best possible way. Aside from the irony slash hypocrisy slash possible brilliance that a story about how too much indulgence in fantasy keeps us from being connected to reality might use a little bit too much abstract dream logic to keep us invested in Robin's plight, but then at one point it completely abandons the show don't tell concept to lecture about how bad this new technology is, because wanting to imitate celebrities is the same as kicking puppies or something. I don't know, maybe it was just an awkwardly delivered speech and it didn't totally convince me. The animation by itself, with its plethora of fantastic designs and yes, acid trippiness, might be worth it alone, but even then, I can't give it a complete pass because she has the exact same facial expression all the time. From first seeing herself as animated to discovering that people want to kill her. The Congress is definitely not a simple watch and not for everyone, but it is fascinating and challenging, and this kind of imagination and ambition should definitely be encouraged.
It'd be the death of you, Jack. You won't be able to withstand the emotional and physical shock provoked by love.
I know, my heart looks like a toy, but it's not to be played with.
A boy is born on the coldest day on Earth with a frozen heart.
Born of cold and winter air.
No! No frozen jokes! So his adoptive mother makes him a clock heart, and tells him throughout his life that to keep his heart from breaking, he must never fall in love. So guess what happens in the first 5 minutes? This story was actually first a picture book created by the leader of a French rock band who also made an entire concept album for the story that would become the basis for this film. And while not every song is story crucial, the songs are always partnered with some delightfully quirky animation, giving the impression that the movie is comprised comprised of a series of music videos. It's definitely not the most efficient narrative device, but definitely gives the film an energy and an identity. There's a very evident Laika Tim Burton vibe to the animation, if mildly more realistic. I mean, comparatively, their eyes are practically normal size. Which unfortunately makes their facial expressions a little hard to read if their faces aren't pushed right up against the camera lens. Or maybe it's just because the character animation just isn't that flexible. Apparently nothing a bunch of camera spins can't fix. Concept design is awesome though. As for its story, it's definitely the Romeo and Juliet / Moulin Rouge brand of romance. Not so much in its structure, but that the story is meant to be this big soap opera meant to convey the pain and intensity of love, rather than address all the painfully obvious ways every single conflict could have been avoided. Yeah, there's a lot of people's not-so-favorite romantic tropes in this film. Lies and misunderstandings and all that. However, there is something genuinely endearing about the characters and their relationships to each other. They're all just so blatantly earnest about their adorably cheesy sentiments, making the smaller character moments, well, adorable. There's just the other small problem that the dubbing sucks. Every single line sounds like the actors are trying to get through the script as fast as they possibly can, so everyone sounds so monotone. Thankfully, they are very good singers. The songs they sing varies, but the background score is excellent. I've never seen an animated film set to a rock opera. It's so interesting. They really force some of those lyrics though. There's also all the characters and scenes that add absolutely nothing to the story, like he gets chased by Jack the Ripper on a train and it never comes up again. Also, not a good or bad thing, but it does have a very French ending. However, through the strength of its art, character moments, and background music, I still basically enjoyed it. At the very least, I prefer it to Corpse Bride. But if you really want a steampunk animation that badly, you might as well just wait for Hullabaloo to come out. It should only take like 3 years.
How'd you escape?
It's simple, Sherman. I noticed the distance between the sewer lids, reasoned that there must be one directly under the guillotine platform, noted the loose board under the basket, computed the angle at which the setting sun would bounce off your glasses, momentarily blinding the executioner, and chose that moment to swipe the executioner's melon, giving me the added weight to tip the boards, facilitating my exit.
That's amazing.
It's not amazing. It was just a matter of keeping my head.
Huh. Keeping your head up. I don't get it.
Oh, how grand and refreshing it is to have a cartoon film adaptation that isn't awful. Because shockingly, turns out cartoons make better cartoons than live actors being cartoons. Yes, it's definitely different, as the original Mr. Peabody's Improbable History was dialogue based to keep the animation cheap, and this one has Peabody pulling a Sherlock Downey Jr. in 3D. Flaunt that animation budget, Dreamworks. But in the end, they're both showcases of cartoony, exaggerated icons of history that aren't really supposed to be taken all that seriously. Though I can see people preferring the quiet charm of the original to this one's excessive flash. But Peabody still likes bad puns, and Sherman might actually have his own personality, and where before the two had much more of a professor, assistant, or even owner and pet vibe, here they are very clearly a father and his kind of dopey son, which is not a problem at all because that dynamic is the heart and soul of this movie. Every scene these two are together is either very fun or very sweet. Heck, I don't think anyone cares that even their voices aren't remotely similar. I mean, you got a great, dignified voice out of the father of Modern Family. I got nothing but respect. However, while I don't really consider this to be a worse movie than Penguins, I do have far more problems with it. Number one, Penny. I get the necessary addition of a female character, but how insecure is the heterosexual agenda when you have to imply a romantic relationship between two 9-year-olds? Especially since less than 12 hours ago, one of them put the other one in a chokehold. Yeah, even though she got better over time, in the first act, she is just the worst person. And even after is basically useless. Number two, the social worker subplot. Seriously, wasn't there enough going on without this unlikable, discarded villain from Illumination? Even though it is a decent allegory for prejudice against irregular families, which I believe is ultimately the reason they had to change the origin story of how Peabody and Sherman met, because he couldn't have saved him from abuse. No, a dog raising a human? That has to be the outrageous thing. This might have been saved if it had not concluded terribly. Which brings us to 3, the last 15 minutes. The whole thing, save the very last minute, is awful. Like, this is the second graph for this movie, which ironically comes right after the best scene in this movie. Also that the plot is a little fragmented because of the time-skipping locations. In conclusion, definitely flawed, but Mr. Peabody and Sherman themselves still make this a reasonably fun time killer.